Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the British monarchy and why I think it should be abolished. That's right, I want to fire the Queen, and him, and all the little children royals as well. They're all fired, pack up your things, so long your services are no longer required, sort of thing. So I guess I should make my case for that opinion, and it's a rather simple one, to be honest. I don't like hereditary hierarchies. I don't think it's right that someone should be born into a position of power over other people. Now, you might say, well, the royals don't actually have any real political power anymore, and this is kind of true to an extent, but they still inherit at birth a position of enormous privilege and wealth. And this is in a country where the Conservatives' austerity politics have led to continued increases in food bank usage, cuts to child welfare have led to an increase in the number of children living in poverty, and so on. And it is completely indefensible to me that one child could be born into a manufactured poverty while another could be born into the wealthy royal family. Now, one of the ways the royals do still have some political power is via the Queen's speeches, such as the state opening of Parliament, in which she reads a statement outlining government policy.
My ministers will continue to bring the public finances under control so that Britain lives within its means, and to move to a higher wage and lower welfare economy where work is rewarded.
That's a clip from the state opening of Parliament 2016 there, where the Queen read out a pro-austerity speech while sitting on a golden throne and wearing a hat with 2,900 precious gems in it, including one of the largest diamonds in the world. Now, nobody wearing this hat should be able to say Britain should have to live within its means without getting sucked into an irony black hole. The royals are wealthy and privileged not because of anything they've done to earn it, but because they were born into it at the expense of others, and this is wrong. Now, okay, if you're a regular viewer of my channel, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. You're probably on board with me being outraged about the country having to bear the enormous cost of this one particular family who did nothing whatsoever to earn it. Well, this video is not really aimed at you, I'm sorry to say. This video is aimed at people who, when I mentioned the enormous cost of the royal family, scrolled down to the comment box and started typing, actually, I think you'll find the royals bring in more money than they cost us. Yeah, they're a benefit to the economy, it turns out. Haven't you seen that CGP Grey video? The true cost of the royal family explained. It's really interesting, you should check it out. So, this video. This is what I want to talk about today. Now, before we get into it, I just want to state that I'm not attacking old CGP Grey here. Often on my YouTube channel, I talk about Nazis and alt-righters and fascists and racists, and I just want to make a note here to say CGP Grey is, to the best of my knowledge anyway, not that. I have in the past enjoyed several of his videos, and I've often shared his video on gerrymandering in particular, which is a really useful, easy to follow visual explanation, and I'd actually encourage you all to give it a look, so I'll link it below. So why am I responding to this video today? Well, the fake answer is that it's got 4.5 million views, it's the top hit on YouTube if you search for royal family cost, and it's spreading a bunch of easily disprovable lies and oversimplifications. The true reason, though, is that back in my pre-YouTube days when I was reduced to arguing unseen on dying internet debate forums, any mention of the cost of the monarchy would inevitably see someone post this video, and then we'd all have to argue about whether it was right or wrong all over again. These days, though, I have a YouTube channel and a platform, and I'm going to use it self-servingly to get the last word in and retroactively win all of those arguments. I'm in mad scientist mode here, full disclosure. They'll see, they'll all see, and all that.
Back to the present day, let's compare the profits and losses by using a tenner to represent £10 million. The cost to maintain the royal family today is £40 million per year, but the revenue paid to the UK from the royal lands is £200 million per year. 200 million in revenue, subtract 40 million in salary costs equals 160 million pounds in profit. That's right, the United Kingdom earns 160 million pounds in profit every year from the royal family.
So then, first off here, I'd like to admit a bit of bias. Even if these numbers were remotely true, I'd still support abolishing the monarchy, such is my disdain for hereditary positions of power. Luckily for me, though, they're not remotely true. There are massive problems on both sides of this equation. Let's start with the, quote, salary cost of the royal family, which CGP Grey puts at £40 million. And I should note here that this video came out in 2011, prior to the Sovereign Grant Act, which reformed the way the monarchy is paid by the government. These days they're paid a percentage of the revenues from the Crown Estate. The Sovereign Grant for the last year was 76.1 million, so they've had quite the increase in the last few years, but since CGP Grey uses the 40 million figure, let's talk about that. Now the problem is, this salary cost is only a fraction of the actual cost of the monarchy. CGP Grey fails to include lots of other costs that are separate to any money that is paid directly to the Queen, such as security costs. If the royals travel somewhere, they do so with a security detail, and this is paid for by the state. The security costs for big events like Prince Harry's wedding to Meghan Markle earlier this year run into the millions, and that's all paid for by the taxpayer. The travel costs themselves are also not mentioned. If the royals go and visit somewhere to cut a ribbon or whatever, the costs for the trip fall on the local government of wherever they went. The refurbishment of royal properties is not mentioned. Buckingham Palace's ongoing renovation is estimated to cost £369 million and is the justification given for the recent large increase in the sovereign grant. So since their house needs fixing, we gave them a raise to pay for it, i.e. we're paying for it. And after all that, this 40 million figure here seems fairly ridiculous. Most estimates I've seen for the true cost of the monarchy are in the low hundreds of millions annually. And I'm being intentionally fuzzy with the figure here because when it comes to this sum, none of what I just said actually matters. Because the real problem here isn't the 40 million in costs, it's the 200 million in, quote, revenue from Crown land. Because here's the thing, if tomorrow all the royals just evaporated or fell off the earth or something, that land would still exist. It's not going anywhere, is it? It doesn't need the royals around to be present in our dimension. You know, it's not tied to their spirit or something. Without a monarch on the throne, all the trees would wither and die or something. No, the land and our ability to do profitable things with it would still be there without the monarchy. A more accurate sum here is £40 million against nothing. You know, why not kick the royals out and keep 100% of the revenue, you might ask.
But perhaps that's not enough for you because you're a real greedy geezer. Why not kick the royals out and keep 100% of the revenue? Because it's still their land. King George the Crazy wasn't crazy enough to give up everything, just the profits. But it wasn't only him. Every monarch since King George III has voluntarily turned over the profits from their land to the United Kingdom. If the government stopped paying the royal family's living and state expenses, the royals would be forced to take back the profits from their land, and your taxes, dear monarchy haters, would go up, not down.
So there's a lot going on in this clip. First off, I'd like to note the backing away from the initial question, which was why not kick the royals out, to the much softer scenario of the government simply stopping paying for their expenses, after which the royals would apparently be forced to stop turning over the revenue from the Crown Estate. My first issue with this is that CGP Grey's version of kicking the royals out appears to arbitrarily leave them with all their land and wealth, and also the apparent ability to negotiate from a position of power with the British government, and I have to ask why he's imposing these measures. You see, although CGP Grey says it's still their land, the Crown Estate is not actually the monarch's private property. They cannot do with it as they wish. If they were to be able to, quote, take back the revenue from the property overseen by the Crown Estate, this would involve renegotiating the arrangement with the government and coming away with private ownership of everything, which is ludicrous. Although, to be fair, given how the Brexit negotiations are going, maybe it's not. You see, my version of kicking the royals out involves confiscating all their stuff, because it's not really their stuff at the end of the day. They inherited it from someone, who inherited it from someone, etc., who claimed ownership of it by killing everyone who disagreed with them. It wouldn't exactly be kicking the royals out if we left them with sole ownership of huge parts of the country, would it? CGP Grey is basically saying after we abolish the monarchy will then respond by saying etc. And no, after we've abolished the monarchy, they've been abolished. They don't get a turn. This is a particular sort of bad faith argument that I've seen a few times. Let me give you another example. Do you support an increase in green renewable energy? And I imagine most of you would say yes, unless you happen to be oil barons or something. Now what I'm going to do is fixate on that one opinion of yours and extrapolate from that way more than is logical or necessary. So you support an increase in green energy, which means you support a decrease of the use of fossil fuels, which means you support the current employees of the fossil fuel industry being made unemployed. And how cruel of you, just before Christmas and everything, you classist monster. And before you can protest that you also support, I don't know, job guarantees for fossil fuel workers, or various welfare systems, or a universal basic income, or something like that, I've already run away with my fingers in my ears saying la la la, I can't hear you, you classist monster. Now I'm speaking from experience here because I've had this happen to me. Reality isn't turn-based, however. We can support and do multiple things at the same time. So in this case, my bill to abolish the monarchy would say, we're no longer paying for the royal family's expenses, and also the Crown estate will henceforth be publicly owned, and also the royals will lose all hereditary positions and powers, and also, if you don't like that, you can go and sit on your crown, which is now ours. So anyway, that's the land argument dealt with there. Now, the other common response to the argument that the royals cost the country is the tourism argument. Tourists come here just to see the Queen, apparently.
Plus, 160 million is just the easily measurable money the United Kingdom makes from the royal family. Don't forget their huge indirect golden goose, tourists. Annoying though they might be to the locals by blocking the tube and refusing to stand on the right, they dump buckets of money on the UK to see the sights, travel ludicrously short distances by public transport, and generally act silly a long way from home. Sure, not everything they come to see is royal, but the most expensive stuff is. And who are the biggest spenders? The Yanks. After they finish buying maple syrup and cheap pharmaceuticals, Tijuana professional services, and illegal pharmaceuticals, where do they go next? The United Kingdom. Americans fly across an ocean to see a land filled with castles that aren't plastic. And why do the Americans think France's castles are so boring and stinky and the UK's castles are so awesome? Because real monarchs still use them. The Tower of London is so stunning to visitors because the royal crest on the yeoman warder's uniform is real. It's not a lame historical reenactment or a modern LARPing quest, it's the embodiment of the living, breathing queen. Everywhere you look, she sprinkled fairy dust on banal objects to make them magically attractive to tourists, 12 million of whom visit every year, spending £7,000 million, which suddenly makes those direct profits look like rather small change.
So there's a lot to talk about right here. Where to start? So the comparison with France is particularly audacious and cheeky here, because as you might know, France makes a lot more money off tourism than the UK. In 2017, France was the #1 tourist destination in the world, whereas the United Kingdom was 7th with less than half of the number of individual tourists. The Palace of Versailles gets vastly more visitors each year than Buckingham Palace. According to a CNN travel report, in 2013, Versailles had over 7 million visitors, and Buckingham Palace had less than 1 million. So living monarchs don't seem to be that big of a tourist attraction. So how does CGP Grey get away with this France comparison? Well, he needlessly limits himself to talking about just one group of people that happen to visit the UK more than France, and that's Americans. And there is absolutely no reason to do this except to give the false impression that the UK attracts more visitors than France, when if you consider all tourists, it's not even close. Also, as a little aside here, when CGP Grey says, why do Americans think France's castles are so boring and stinky and the UK's castles are so awesome, he shows pictures of 2 castles. Now, the boring and stinky castle is the fortress of Najac in France, and the awesome castle is Mont Saint-Michel in, no prizes for guessing this one, France. They're both French castles. Well, actually, this one isn't a castle, but, whatever, they're both in France. What CGP Grey has done is mix up this place with this place, St. Michael's Mount, which has a similar name and appearance, but is actually in the UK. Now, given that CGP Grey, an American, can't tell the difference between a French castle and an English one, that kind of disproves his point there. Hardy ha, an error was made on the internet. Regardless, tourists don't get a cup of tea and a chat with the Queen or anything when they go to see a royal property. Whether the royals are around or not doesn't matter. The buildings are still going to be there. And again, as we've seen, more people go to see France's palaces, and they got all choppy with their monarchs. And that's the thing, even if the actual monarchy was officially abolished, the people, the family, would still exist. They'd still live in the country. If they're meant to be a draw by themselves, there'd be nothing stopping them from being, I'm sure they'd still be invited to events and to open buildings and whatever else. The difference is that they'd have to pay their own way. And I don't even imagine that would be particularly difficult for them. They'd still be a celebrity family regardless of official status. And I imagine there'd be a lot of monarchists around who'd be willing to send them their money. Maybe they could do a GoFundMe or something. To sum up here, without the monarchy, the land would still exist, the royal estates would still exist, and the people who are currently the royals would still exist. All that would change is that our government would stop funneling millions of pounds into the pockets of one particular, already rich family. Now, what else haven't I mentioned here? Well, very quickly, CGP Grey gives the impression that the royals turn over the income from all of their lands, but this isn't actually true. The duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall are administered separately from the Crown estate, and the royals don't have to turn over the revenue from those, and they're not subject to tax. The royals voluntarily, how nice of them, pay income tax on the income generated by the duchies, less official expenditures of course, however they remain exempt from corporation tax. The duchies have been valued together at more than £1 billion, and this is, of course, not mentioned by CGP Grey. That's about it from me today, folks. That's a short one, isn't it, from me? I usually make longer videos than this, but to be honest, I just needed to get this one out of my system. If you're desperate for more content, I have a little announcement to make. Today is the 2-year anniversary of me joining Patreon. And I thought I'd do a little something fun and special for all my backers over there. But then I couldn't think of anything, so I waffled into a microphone about YouTube for 20 minutes. So if you'd like to hear me talking a bunch of nonsense for a while, head over there and take a look. Right, remember to like and subscribe and all that, and follow me on Twitter or ask me a question on Curious Cat if you fancy. Brackets, links below. Righty-ho, folks. See you next time.